Welcome to the audio version of Conjured BTS, a BTS fanfiction by Zmelio. Episode 2, Conjuring Jin. Alright guys, that's a wrap. Butter is in the can, the producer laughed. Seokjin turned to Hoseok. What does in the can mean? Hoseok shrugged. Jimin leaned over and whispered, I think it just means we're done. Yoongi stretched. Dear God, I hope so. Namjoon laughed politely along with the joke. Thanks so much, Jenna. Be sure to thank everyone on your team. This experience has been wonderful for us. For us too, Namjoon, Jenna replied. As soon as the final version is done with the mixer, we will let you know. That would be appreciated, Namjoon confirmed. The choreographer in particular will want to get the final mix as soon as possible. Taehyung yelled out one last thank you to Jenna as the conversation ended. As they left the studio, Jungkook asked Seokjin if he would like to get some food. Seokjin shook his head. He was ready to call it a night. Jungkook asked the rest of the group. It sounded like most of them were going out. Seokjin reconsidered going and asked his roommate Yoongi what his plans were. Yoongi said he had a beat running through his mind and he wanted to get it saved, so he would hit the studio first. It won't be long, Hyung. Why don't you go with them and I could pick you up on the way home, Yoongi offered. Oh, no. You think I am some sort of fool, Seokjin growled. You'd end up staying late at the studio or worse, falling asleep there while I'm stuck with the Maknaes until they finally run out of energy, which is never. Yoongi smirked. Suit yourself, it was just an offer. Yeah, thanks, but no thanks, Seokjin grumbled back. I'll just go straight home. Seokjin entered their dorm and threw his belongings on the floor by the door. Hoseok would scold him later. He took a candy from a dish in the kitchen and gazed out the large window at the city while it dissolved in his mouth. When it was gone, he closed his eyes and let the silence of the dimly lit apartment wash over him and prepare him for sleep. The hum of an air conditioner fan and a cool breeze made him shiver. He went to his room and after changing into pajamas, threw on his favorite blue sweater to fight the cold. He curled up under covers and wished himself pleasant dreams before falling asleep. The teacher droned on as Amy watched the clock slowly tick second by second. Even on a normal day, she wanted to be anywhere but school, but today she couldn't wait to get home. When the bell finally rang, she sprang from her seat and rushed to the door with a backpack in her hand. She vaguely heard the teacher's voice say something about being careful. She even managed to get out of the school before the hallways filled. She threw her backpack over her shoulder. She thought for a second about taking the bus, but then she would have to wait for everyone. All that rush would have been for nothing. She bounced on her toes a couple of times to build up her resolve and then dashed towards home. She knew people turned to look at her as she sped past them in the park. She didn't care. When her legs started to burn, she considered pausing to lean against a tree in the grove, where she would sometimes go to be alone, and as the grove whisked by, she guessed she was going to make it. She finally reached her house, burst through the door, and up to her room before anyone could question her. She closed the door behind her and slipped the backpack off her shoulders in one smooth motion before she turned and collapsed on her bed. Her legs throbbed, but when she looked up at the clock, she was satisfied. She had time before dinner. She grasped the edge of the bed and pulled, dragging her lower body up so she could reach her notepad on the nightstand. She brought the notepad onto the bed and untucked the picture from where she had shoved it into the fold at the top. She smiled as she brushed her thumb over his face. Kim Seokjin of BTS. She rolled over and pressed the picture to her heart. She imagined a muffled shouting from the picture because he couldn't breathe. She laughed and lifted the picture to look him in the eyes. Today, I'm going to see you for real. Now, this was a time in the world where things happened that were strange and unexplained. Still very few people attributed that to magic or believed that it actually existed. Amy knew deep down in her heart of hearts that this was a fantasy. She wasn't actually going to cast a magic spell and meet Jin face to face, but to tell the truth, she was desperate. Every day was the same, over and over. A sea of faces and no friends. Why did her family have to move to stupid Arizona? It's hot, it's dry, and it's barren. She was tired of playing video games by herself. She had watched every Run BTS episode 10 times over. Just 2 days with Jin. Maybe she could bear the torture for a while. She sighed and put the picture aside to look at her written instructions. She stood up and pulled out the wand that she had enchanted the night before. The instructions said there were several ways to enchant an item. She could just mention it in her spell, but she found and followed detailed instructions to make sure it was done right. She started questioning her item choice. Reading her instructions again, it suggested an item that had a personal meaning for the bias she were conjuring. She fretted over it for several minutes, but decided she didn't want to go through the enchanting process again. She wanted to do this tonight. Back to the notes, she looked at the line she had written for the summoning spell. Wait, what was that phrase again? She put her hand to her head. She groaned, No. The instructions online said she could only do it once. If she messed it up, there was no trying again. She squinted at last night's bad handwriting. How sleepy was she when she wrote this? Why had she written a whole paragraph? The instructions said to write a line, not a soliloquy. She rewrote it more legibly and pared it down to one sentence. She stood and grasped the wand in her shaky hand. She took a deep breath, but before she could exhale, her mom called her downstairs that dinner was ready. Her eyes snapped to the clock. She had wasted so much time. Her mom's voice carried up the stairs again with a less patient tone. Amy growled and tossed the wand under her bed. Luckily, her mom let her bring dinner up to her room tonight. She took big bites of hamburger as she read through the process over and over again. She set the food down and grasped the wand again in her slightly sweaty palm. She opened her mouth to speak, but her mind flooded with several other BTS solo songs. She clasped her mouth with her hand and shook her head. Oops, that would have... She wondered if reciting random lyrics would bring a random member. She shook her head, drank some water from a cup, let out a yawn, and checked the instructions directly from her tablet one more time. She clasped her hands with confidence. It was now or never. She pointed the wand and recited her line. A loyal member of the fandom requests someone who's truly handsome. The room filled with hearts and bright lights. Jin appeared across the room, dressed in blue pajama pants with yellow dots, and a blue sweater with 2 white stripes on the sleeves at the elbows. He squinted until the hearts faded, then looked at his surroundings in shock. Where am I? He covered his mouth in surprise. What? Am I speaking English? Jin, is that you? Amy asked in a tiny voice. They both stared at each other for a moment. What is this? Didn't I go home and go to sleep after the recording session? Then it seemed to register to Jin that he was looking at a young girl in Brighton. Hello, my dear. Do you know where I am? He asked. Or how I can suddenly speak English, he continued in his thoughts. Amy stepped closer. I can't believe it worked. Jin was confused. What worked? Amy placed her hand to her heart, suddenly embarrassed. I'm sorry. Now that you're here, I'm not as sure this was a good choice, but I was lonely, and I thought you would be a good friend, so I cast a spell to bring you here. Where is here? Jin frowned. America. Arizona, actually, Amy responded. From what I understand, your consciousness is actually here, but only I will be able to see you. And for you, this will all happen while you are sleeping, so you might think it's all a dream. Since I cast a spell in English, you are able to understand and speak to me in English. It will last 2 days for me, but for you it will be a short dream. I don't think it will interrupt your rest. Jin thought for a moment and shrugged. Well, as long as thousands or millions of people don't get the same idea. He looked at her with some concern. Are you Army? She nodded shyly. And are you sad? He asked, and she nodded again. What's your name? Amy, she said, looking down at his feet. Jin wasn't sure if this was just a dream, but he found himself full of empathy for the girl. So he perked up and put on his best Jin persona. I will spend the next 2 days with you, being happy, Amy. Amy put her hands together, hopefully. Really? Jin smiled brightly. Really? What do you want to do first? Amy thought, he doesn't seem to mind being here. Maybe this is okay. Maybe this could be everything I was hoping it would be. She decided to move forward as if this was normal. She asked, Can we play video games, Jin Oppa? Jin winked and shot her with finger guns. Amy giggled and Jin replied, "Sounds great to me."